On behalf of the Council on Library and Information Resources and the Digital Library Federation, welcome to today's eResearch Peer Network and Mentoring Group webinar. My name is Rita Van Dynen. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Many of you have already been using the chat window that's on the left-hand side of the screen. So at any time during today's session, feel free to type in comments or questions in the chat window. We will be pausing throughout the session for questions and discussion. Our webinar is scheduled to conclude at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, if at any time during the webinar you have technical difficulties, audio or otherwise, please let Louisa or I know using the private chat option or by sending us an email. And we'll get those email addresses in the chat window in just a second. And also note that you can exit and re-enter the webinar at any time. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording from today's session will be posted in Clear Connect. And for our guest speakers from Minnesota, I will also send you a link to that recording so that you can have access to it. Okay. So today's webinar will cover the following. Welcome everyone. We're glad that you could join us and that you can hear us and that we can hear you. Kendall's going to first summarize the results of our most recent group activity. Next, one member from each institutional team will review their findings from the exercise, and we'll follow up with some time for Q&A with that. Then Natsuko will introduce us to our guest speakers from the University of Minnesota, who will talk to us today about data management needs in the College of Liberal Arts. After Q&A, we will talk briefly about upcoming consultation sessions, and we'll close with a few housekeeping items, including details on the next webinar. Also a reminder, if you want to tweet about your webinar experience today, there is a hashtag available, and I will put that in the chat window momentarily. So joining us today are some familiar faces. We have our faculty member, Chuck Humphrey. Chuck is the coordinator for Research Data Management Services at the University of Alberta Libraries. Also joining us are our 4 CLEAR DLF postdoctoral fellows in data curation, Vesela Ensberg from UCLA, Ina Cooper from Indiana University, Natsuko Nichols from the University of Michigan, and Kendall Rourke from the University of Alberta. Okay, so for an overview of the group activity, I'll now turn the floor over to Kendall. Kendall, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Rita. So this is just a brief overview of the responses from all of you, and I have a more detailed summary document that I'll share after the webinar today if you're looking to see which universities are working on similar activities, if you're looking for partners or collaborations. So in the assignment focused on different types of assessment activities that are happening at your universities. And we started out by asking you about if activities surrounding environmental scans. So most of you had conducted some type of environmental scan, including a question I guess we can have maybe later in discussion or in chat, something called the data scan, as well as reviewing materials that might fall within that kind of activity.
Okay, Kendall,
yeah.
this is Rita. I have to interrupt you. We're getting some messages from Chris, Jim, and Cindy that they can't hear you. Can everyone else hear Kendall? If so, just drop us in the chat. Yes, okay, so it seems to be a problem with Chris, Jim, and Cindy.
Okay,
So go ahead and
turned my mic
yeah,
up. Does that help at all? Okay, is that better? Okay, so for methodology, the universities, several of you had looked at input from working groups and committees, whether you had joined those or formed them, SWOT analysis, interviews, and also informal information gathering, looking at other survey instruments from peer institutions, and conducting initial surveys. So some of this, the scope, most of you had done internal work, some external, University of Manitoba and University of Toronto, and then many of you had stated that you had included these activities as part of the eScience Institute. So I'm not sure if others were included in that, but those were just a summary from your slides. So go ahead to the next slide. We also asked you if you had conducted any kind of program or service evaluation activities. There was less of a response on this section, as indicated by the previous assignment as well, that this type of activity had yet to be conducted because of the timelines and existing services. So for this, in terms of methodology and scope, most of you had sought feedback from workshops. So that could include attendance statistics, follow-up surveys, or just more informal input. There has been some types of usability testing in terms of program service evaluation. Systematic analysis had been conducted for DMPs. Again, some of you had discussed forming library working groups or other types of groups, and consultation and pilot projects with research support offices, other services on campus and departments. So for needs assessment activities, which we're going to focus on in today's webinar, the methodologies most common were interviews of some sort, surveys, web and other informal conversations, focus groups, data harvesting or data scan. So again, I had a question about that. It would be, I think, interesting to follow up with later. Feedback from workshop and presentations, usability testing, and input from those interest groups that I had discussed before. Most of you in their target populations had looked at faculty researchers, and in general, although there had been smaller surveys, especially targeted at the science, social science, and a grouping of art, science, and engineering. Librarians, both liaison and digital initiatives, as well as IT departments had been the target. University admin and research services, and then students, grads, postdocs, and other types of staff researchers involved in the research process, with a couple specific targets for social science students in the art sciences and engineering. Okay. So the focus overall for the needs, what needs were addressed, there seemed to be a focus on awareness raising, data education and training for all institutions that responded, infrastructure, tools, and resources, and a wide range of other issues, including current data management practices, which I think some of those would be interesting to explore in the more detailed summary document. Data management consultation, information adoption of policy. So in terms of responses for how you will or have used your findings, I thought was interesting emphasis was on identifying data storage needs, informing development of research data services programs, informing stakeholders and defining future goals or policies, informing training program or targeting researchers, the IR development and specs, information that would inform the development of that, devising a strategic plan agenda, implement of training programs that target liaison librarians, identifying early adapters or researchers for pilots, informing social science, analytical, and software services, and informing engagement strategies. And the last, facilitating collaborations or connections to other services or departments across campus that are involved in the research process. So this is just a really, just a overview of your findings, but as I mentioned, I'll share it later this afternoon in Clear Connect, the link to the more detailed summary if you want to see who is, a chart of who's working on what, to look for potential collaborators or to find out more information about those projects, which many of will be addressed in the presentations that you all get today. So that's the summary. If anyone has any questions, I can take those from the chat, or we can go ahead and move on to your presentations.
Kendall, yeah, go ahead and use the chat window if you have any questions or comments for Kendall, and we'll keep moving along. And up next is Colgate University. So whenever you're ready, Colgate.
Okay. I'm hoping everyone can hear me at this point. I've unmuted our telephone. So the timing of this, as I indicated, was really good because we are in the midst of this. We just did our summer data barbecue yesterday. And I was looking at some of the preliminary information we got here. Basically, we were very early on in this whole process, so this was our first really significant internal needs assessment. In terms of our sort of environmental scan looking outward, we have a group of peer and aspirant schools, other liberal arts colleges, so we've been looking at what they're doing. The most notable example of something interesting to us is at Grinnell College. And then I've used participants in iAssist at the lowest recent conference as a sample to look at what institutions there are doing. So that's the other source we've had. I think that's about it right now. I guess in terms of one thing that came out that was interesting in terms of our responses to the summer data barbecue yesterday, was there is interest in something that we're working on developing, which will be some online support for using analytical software such as Stata, SPSS, etc. In fact, and I apologize, I should have done this initially, we have someone new here today, Doug Higgins, who's with IT, who joined Colgate recently and will be working with us in this area. He's got a background in teaching math and stats, doing online education, and working with software such as SPSS. So I think that pretty much covers it right now. Yeah, thank you very much.
For you
adjourn,
yeah, this is your summary slide, and then we also included your site map.
Right, this, and then there was another poster we submitted which we used as props essentially for conversation. Yeah, the research data lifecycle. Put those up, and we had people write comments on them, and then, had faculty, students, looking at them and then asking questions and talking about it. And I think that was actually a pretty successful technique, and I would do it again. I think the Research Data Services site map poster was probably too complex for easy viewing and understanding. And so if I did this again, I'd make something that was a bit more streamlined, a bit easier to understand, and thus more useful for promoting sort of conversations at an event like we were having.
Pete, up next is our friends from Montana. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, so can you hear us? Hello? The red name's muted, right? Can you hear us, Rita? She could hear us earlier.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, you can? Oh, okay. So I guess most of what we've done in terms of environmental scanning is this Ithaca report, the survey whose results came out in May. Yeah. So we were able to see what faculty thought about what they wanted from the library in terms of research data services and then what they thought we provided. And you could view it against other institutions that have done the Ithaca survey. So that has been helpful. And we've also formed working groups that are comprised of people from beyond the library, which has been helpful too. And then this fall, we have planned to do a survey of what data is being created on campus in collaboration with the Chief Information Officer and the Research Computing Group. I put a link there to the Ithaca survey if you want to look at it. It's pretty interesting to us. Let's see. Yeah, I guess what we have in the future is the data barbecue is a great idea, but outreach and education is really our main focus because we've only had services since March and a lot of people don't know this is happening at the library. So just getting the word out is a huge step.
I was going to add Sarah Mannheimer and Layla Sturman are our two data services representatives within the faculty, and they are now liaisons to the VPR, the Vice Provost for Research, and so that's another form of outreach that's been just starting out, but should be really productive. Along those lines, the VPR has started to promote the impact of university research on the local economy in Montana, and we're hoping to, they've built some documentation around that idea, and we're hoping to get some of an explanation of our data services into that documentation. Mm-hmm. It'll be one of the first, another piece of outreach, and that just happened, that really just happened last week where they started to promote that idea. But I think it's worth mentioning for this group, just to watch what your VPR is doing and how you might collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's it for this slide.
Mm-hmm. You can go to the next
slide.
Okay,
great, Montana. There's your summary.
Yep, there's our summary.
Thank you, Montana. Next up, we have Northwestern, so whenever you're ready, Pamela, the floor is yours.
Hi, I just unmuted, and what we've done primarily is surveys, although a number of us, well, a few of us did participate in the eSciences Institute, and so we did kind of a strengths-weakness SWOT analysis before we formed the eSciences Working Group. And the eScience Working Group put together a survey. We surveyed all faculty, postdocs, graduate students, research staff. You can tell that we had 831 responses and 788 people completed the survey. It was in all groups, not just science and social science, but also humanities and arts included. You can tell by the areas of survey we wanted to look at how people were currently managing data, the size, retention, how it's being stored, how it's being shared, and types of training or assistance that they would like, which was really useful. The survey results, I know Cunera did send in our report. The report and the survey were sponsored by the heads of 3 different groups: the Dean of the Northwestern University Libraries, the head of Northwestern University IT, and our head of the Office for Research. Following that larger survey, or maybe almost concurrent to, the Social Sciences Data Survey was run and done in June and just finished. That was faculty, postdocs, graduate students in social sciences, and that had 174 responders. This was more targeted towards what software and computing services and types of analyses were being done and what limitations they had in computing and software services in order to improve social sciences, analytic, and software services over the next few years. For both of these surveys, we plan to follow up, including some types of interviews or focus groups. We're going to use the Purdue Data Curation Profiles Toolkit for follow-ups for the large survey, and the Social Sciences Data Survey is following up with focus groups that have been grouped according to types of researchers. Graduate students are all going to be in one focus group, and then other faculty are going to be grouped into focus groups as appropriate. I think we have another slide here too. We did learn some things from the data survey. You asked us to share things that might have been either setbacks or difficulties. We surveyed the entire institution across all disciplines, but we discovered from some of the write-in responses from humanities and social sciences folks that they didn't really necessarily think that the survey was directed towards them, because they didn't always think of what they created was data, even though documents were the most commonly shared form of data from our respondents. I think a lot of people in areas outside of the sciences don't think of documents as data. So that was part of a problem. And the top respondents were the medical school, because there are lots of people who consider themselves producing data in the medical school, and hard sciences, especially the chemistry department, had really high response. Another one of the drawbacks that isn't on this that we discovered while looking through the results is that in one of the questions we asked people how much data they expect to generate for their next grant, and we probably should have said project, because a lot of people responded, well, I don't have grants. So I think that they thought that they shouldn't answer that question because they don't have grants, so their data that they're collecting are not responding to that. That's basically the whole gist of it. We plan on distributing our report more widely. The reason that we asked to share it only within this group for now is because we were waiting for final approval from the sponsors of the survey, and we'll be sharing it with the entire institution in the best way that we can figure out by probably posting it on a web page. And from that, we hope to start designing services based on the interviews that we conduct. There was one more drawback that we had, and that is that for our last question, we asked people if they were willing to be followed up with for contact, and over 100 people said yes, but then they failed to give us their email addresses, and the survey was completely anonymous. So we only had a couple of people fill in their email addresses for contact, so we need to figure out how to reach out to those other 100 people who said that they'd be willing to be followed up with for an interview. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to do that now. And that's it.
You're Northwestern. University of Arizona. You're up next.
Hi, this is Chris for the University of Arizona. Can you go to the next slide? So we've had a campus data management committee for a couple of years. It's now part of the, it's now a subcommittee, part of the research computing governance committee. And we've got representatives from the BPR's office, our computer center, faculty across campus in really broad range of colleges in the library. And as part of the meetings, they share their unit's data management needs. And then in 2011 and 12, we participated in the eScience Institute. And as part of that, we did an environmental scan of campus and also SWOT analysis. And then most recently in May, we sent out a research data management survey that was sent out to basically to faculty, researchers, graduate students, postdoc fellows, and staff researchers. I'm really impressed by the response Northwestern got. We thought we were doing really well with 375 participants. But we've had 90 people that have requested follow-up meetings. So we're currently working on that. And we're still taking a look at the data, and I've just begun to work on a report that would present the survey data. So I'm probably going to do an executive summary that I can share with a broad range of people on campus, including upper administration. And some of the information the survey asked had to do with what are data storage needs of faculty, and that actually seems to be a huge concern on campus right now. And also for a data archive or data repository, which the campus is beginning to make plans for developing. And then, part of it too is we do have data management services that we offer. We did have a question to get at which one of those, and if there are any additional services that faculty needed to get more of a sense of where we should be devoting our time and effort. And of course, one of the big benefits of doing the survey was that up until when we put out the survey, we've had a lot of problems with letting campus know what services we're offering. And so this actually really helped to get the word out too. Let's see, so we've used, in addition to the survey, we also did usability testing of the website, and we've given presentations to a couple of different colleges on campus, and have also done one-on-one consultations or interviews with people. We think that the population size of the survey was about 12,600. And then you can see on the slide the categories that the questions fell into that I talked about just a few minutes ago. So these are what we hope to, our goals for the survey. To develop new data management services and further develop our existing services. The next bullet has to do with data storage and data repository. What are the functionality and requirements that are needed? And then for the future, to help guide what initiatives the data management subcommittee works on.
Thank you, Arizona. Up next is Illinois. It's like we've lost, we're having some problems with the phone dial-in. So if you dialed in or we've lost people, let's just pause a minute and see what's going on. Illinois, if you'll just hold tight. If you're ready, we'll go ahead.
This is Sarah Williams. Heidi was going to present, but I don't know if Heidi's having phone issues. So I'll go ahead, and Heidi, if you can... Oh, can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay.
We can. Go right ahead.
Okay. And Heidi can jump in if she happens to be on. So we've done some environmental scans. Illinois was also part of the eScience Institute. I wasn't in that group, but I know there were some people who were involved in that and from our library. So there was, some of like a SWOT analysis done with that, and a lot of the environmental scan we had done was related to looking at what some of our peer institutions were doing. And as far as needs assessment on our campus, we've had two kind of broader efforts at this, meaning more than just an individual librarian talking with their departments. There was an effort by a couple of IT groups, IT staff on campus to do one-on-one interviews with researchers on campus as well as IT staff to ask. It was mainly focused on storage needs. I think somebody else mentioned that that's a concern on their campus, and that's something that we've been trying to get a handle on here at Illinois, is what sort of storage needs there are. And then we also did it was like an email conversation with some recipients of NSF and NIH award recipients, and that one was a little bit more broad. We were asking about storage, but also asking about their needs for assistance with data management plans, and just about how well they felt their data is organized and things like that. Let's see, I'm trying to just pick out a few things to mention else. So as far as evaluation, I know one example of a pilot project we've done that we'll probably do some sort of evaluation with at the end of the pilot is piloting assigning DOIs to data sets that are created on campus. But I think one of the issues we've run into is it's sometimes it's hard to come up with kind of a quantitative sort of way to evaluate those sorts of programs. A lot of what our evaluation might be is more anecdotal or qualitative sorts of assessments of that service. And then on this slide, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so all of our needs assessment is focused internally, and at this point most of it's been at the faculty level as opposed to other researchers or graduate students. And the last thing I'll mention here that might be of interest is in the third column here about needs. So when we've talked with people through these interviews and things, infrastructure has been a big concern. That seems to be the first thing that comes to people's mind. But training is something else that once you talk with them, they're like, oh yeah, we would be interested in that, and that would be great if the library could do that, but it's not something that necessarily comes to mind on their own. And then I know one thing that Heidi has found in some of her conversations on campus, that there's, at least on our campus, there's some misgivings or a little hesitancy from faculty for campus policies, right? But they do seem very interested in getting some sort of clarification on what funding agencies are looking for. So, so I think those are kind of the highlights of what we've done here at Illinois.
Thank you so much. Okay, University of Manitoba, the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Mayu from University of Manitoba. Can you hear me? Yes. Great. So the University of Manitoba, we have done some environmental scan and also a series of interviews with the stakeholders, although we are at the beginning of planning and implementing data management services. In 2012, we've done an environmental scan to identify potential partners, internal and also external, by reviewing the university's organizational structures, and also looking into the external entities which influence the university research activities. And based on the findings from the environmental scans, we interviewed several stakeholders, internal partners on this campus, regarding their awareness of data management issues. And we find the results from the interview sessions in a report called Self-Assessment of University of Manitoba, and I share that report.
Hold while I confirm your passcode. Thank you. Your passcode is confirmed. When you hear the tone, you will be the 9th person to join the meeting.
Please, Mayu, it looks like someone's joining. We've had some loss of audio via conference call, so someone's just joining in. So you go ahead and proceed.
Okay, hi. Right, so I've shared a report of these environmental scans in the our peer group forum online. Right, and so about the series of interviews we did. So we had a chance to speak with several internal stakeholders on campus, university administrators at the Office of Research Services, Dean of Science, Chief Information Officer, so the head of the digital initiatives at our libraries, and also the faculty members in sciences, namely biology and computer science. And I think overall, these stakeholders are interested in data management issues and also welcoming the library to play a key role in implementing data management services on campus. They also identified some potential problems. Well, when speaking with our IT department, Information Systems and Technology, we learned that they don't have a strong mandate to support the research computing needs at the point of the 2012. And the state of the IT infrastructure at that time was not able to support the data storage or sharing requirements of the researchers. And also the Office of the Research Services expressed the concerns that researchers may not welcome, say, the intervention from, say, the libraries or other units on campus regarding their data management practices. And also in Canada, public funding agencies have not mandated the data management plans. So because of that, the data management issues may not be the priority for all the researchers. And we also compiled a strategic agenda based on the findings from these interviews. And we have formed a data management group consisting of the librarians from different units. And we just continue our discussions about how we should proceed in terms of implementing data management services, also outreaching to researchers on campus that include faculty and students. We are also planning a couple of surveys. One survey is targeting our liaison librarians, and the purpose of the survey is to find out the needs our liaisons have in terms of data management training. So we would like to equip our liaison librarians with enough knowledge and skills so that they could address the basic level of data management questions coming from faculty and students. And also, we're hoping to identify whether the liaisons have any preferred formats of training. and if they are interested in a particular topics regarding data management or open access or scholarly communications. The other survey we are planning is targeting the researchers on campus, faculty, students, research associates with this university. And the purpose of the survey is to find out the current practices of these researchers and also what kind of existing infrastructure, tools, or resources they are using in their data management practices, and whether they have any data management needs which have not been met. And based on the findings from the survey, the library is hoping to implement training and outreach programs that would target those needs that the researchers have and then the needs which haven't been met. And also, we are hoping to identify some early adopters among the researchers surveyed to see if we could partner with them in the next step, which is to actually do some data management pilots, maybe collaborating with these early adopters to develop the data management plans or assisting them with deposits with existing data repositories. Thank you.
Manitoba. Up next is University of Rochester. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So what we've done up to this point is sort of focused on environmental scanning and needs assessment. So a couple librarians here went through the first eScience Institute and did quite a bit of environmental scanning, interviewed a whole bunch of folks, and developed the eScience agenda. Starting last year, when I started here, we kind of continued with interviewing faculty and IT staff, folks in our research computing center, graduate students, some undergrads as well. We did a survey as well. For us, we're a fairly small institution, and so we got a good response to the survey, but it's still kind of a small, raw number of people. And so for us, interviews I think have been really our most effective form of information gathering. So like I said, both the interviews and the survey are kind of both environmental scanning and needs assessment, figuring out what's out there and what people have and what services already exist, and where the gaps are and what kinds of things we might fill in with. For evaluation, most of what we've done focuses on the workshops that we've conducted, which were primarily about data management planning. We've monitored and tracked attendance to the different kinds of workshops. Things like, how many students versus how many faculty, what departments, that sort of thing. And we've also done kind of web surveys afterwards to gauge satisfaction and if there were topics that people wanted covered that we didn't cover, that kind of thing. For the survey, we did write it up. It's kind of a white paper. It's been shared within the library and within university administration. I'm not sure if we'll write it up to publish, but I think I did send it out to this group. If you could keep it internal, I'd appreciate that. Oh, I did want to mention another thing that we did for needs assessment that I kind of forgot to write down. I got all of the, or a whole bunch of data about all the grant proposals that our faculty had submitted over the last 3 years, and did some analysis. What we're trying to figure out from there is kind of what the primary deadlines are, or what times a year are kind of the most active for people submitting funding requests, so that we can promote data management plan services kind of at the right times. We're also looking for who are the folks who are most actively applying for funding, who are the folks who are successful in getting funding, and can we get their data management plans, that sort of thing. Also, if there are folks who have had proposals turned down that they might be revising, can we get in touch with them and help out with the data management plan if that happened to be a weak point. So for scope, like I said, we did a web survey. We've done interviews and informal conversations. There was a data storage interest group that actually wasn't started by the library. It was started by IT, but I joined into that. And it was interesting because it was sort of about data storage generally, but it very quickly became mostly about research data. And that kind of I don't know, I think we got a good voice kind of in there. Our needs assessment has mostly focused on the art sciences and engineering faculty. We do have a medical school as well, and there are some librarians in our medical library who are also kind of working on data issues themselves. We're trying to talk to basically anybody who might have any kind of interest in data. What we're finding is that, many people have thoughts about what the library or the university could be doing differently or better, that kind of thing. So we're kind of casting as wide of a net as we can. I think similar to what Illinois said, people seem to be primarily focused on infrastructure issues, especially data storage. Graduate students in particular, though, were more likely to ask for education and training. And so that's an area that we're going to expand. We've been using the survey and the other data to guide what we've been doing over the last year. So, for example, the data storage issues have kind of pushed us to collaborate with our Research Computing Center to work on storage issues with them. Can we collaborate together to do a better or a data repository at all? Since folks also asked for more support for data management plans, we've kind of expanded our offerings there. One thing that we kind of came up with was that, there were bits and pieces of data support kind of all over campus, in IT, in the grants office, that sort of thing. And sometimes people weren't aware of all that was available to them already. And so I think that we have a really important role in knowing everything that's going on and being able to connect people to services, even if we're not necessarily offering the services ourselves. So I think that's about the gist of it.
Thank you, Kathleen. There is a question for you in the chat room from Montana about how you got that grant data. So if you want to take a look at that, and we will keep moving along with the University of Toronto. Whenever you're ready, Toronto.
Hello, this is Brenica. I'm here with Dylan Dearborn and Sean Meikle as well. I guess maybe I'll start off by saying we're a large and complex institution. We have 80,000 students, 12,000 faculty, but we have been involved for a number of years now, starting with the ARL eScience Institute in terms of incrementally building capacity for RDM. So we did participate in the ARL eScience Institute, where we did environmental scans as well as a SWOT analysis and a number of interviews with faculty at sort of the top administrative levels. We've gathered information informally as well. So more recently, looking at what external libraries are doing through initiatives such as this, and touching base with our peers that we know, Canadian peer institutions, but as well as more broadly in the US and the UK. We have opportunities that have sort of come to us. We had Carl host the Research Data Management Institute here a couple years ago, which gave us sort of a sense of the landscape in Canada. We also had a stakeholder meeting at U of T last year. Compute Canada surveyed researchers, and so we participated and learned a little bit about our HPC structure at U of T. So we have something called SciNet here, which is a large component of the infrastructure of how big data is used at U of T and across Canada. At the Map and Data Library, one of our long-standing sort of data services units, we've done a lot of informal information gathering about RDM and data services and how they're structured at peer institutions. So what's kind of come out of this is we do have a library data working group that has representation across the 3 campuses at U of T. It includes our IT, and it includes folks across the sciences as well as social sciences, and I would say humanities as well. And we've hosted a few events recently. For example, we did a graduate student workshop where we basically had actually a lot of science students who participated, and we had sort of an informal 2-hour event where graduate students talked about how they're currently managing their research data and what they would like to see from the library in terms of services. So that was sort of an informal needs assessment. And we have things happening across the 3 campuses. So for example, our Mississauga campus is piloting Dataverse for a specific department, I think geography. They've also done a situational analysis recently as a result of the initial interviews that they did out of the eScience Institute. So we've used a variety of methods, so informal conversations, structured interviews, web surveys. We've reached out across researchers, students, campus IT, and our research office. Some of the things that we want to get out of this is to identify disciplinary trends, obviously design reflective services. We're trying to monitor the journal policy landscape and its impact on U of T. And one other sort of interesting, sort of discrete event that we're currently involved in is we've partnered, well not partnered, we're actually in conversation with the School of Graduate Studies, and we're putting together a course proposal as part of their graduate professional skills program, and we're hoping in January to roll out a Introduction to Research Data Management course, which will be a 3-hour workshop. We're obviously trying to build community, and I think the needs assessment will also help us in terms of future grant applications that may become available to us in Canada. So some of the things we've learned, I think we've done quite a bit of needs assessment and environmental scan activity, but one of the challenges is that we are so big, so communicating and sharing those activities and sort of drawing everything together can be somewhat difficult. I think we need more in-depth scans and needs assessment, particularly around very thorny issues like privacy, confidentiality, intellectual property issues, the things that we sort of see as being difficult. And I think we sort of have a sense that we need to move on and actually start making this a part of what we do. So I think we need to continue with needs assessment and environmental scans, but there's sort of a consensus that we need to sort of launch formal services. So we feel like we really need to sort of step that up.
Perhaps build in increments and iterate on formal services rather than continuing to assess them.
Yeah, and maybe another challenge that we've identified is because it's such a large campus, there are a lot of disciplines, departments and faculties, some of which are sufficiently already handling their data, some aren't, and figuring out who needs what kind of support can be difficult, especially since, for example, with the ARL Science Institute, we did interviews mostly at the administrative level, so doing more needs assessment of actual researchers could help reveal some of those gaps. So I think that's it. Oh.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay, Toronto, your last slide, your challenges slide is there. If you want to comment on that, go right ahead. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving.
Oh, okay. Well, information gathering, I guess we have found it is labor intensive, and we have sort of broad and complex needs at U of T. We have a lot of different disciplines that are research intensive, so we can't just say that we have a strength in, say, medicine or in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So it's sort of, that is definitely a distinct challenge. And it's hard to generalize, I think, based on the needs assessment that we've done for that reason. So definitely, I think we need to do continue to do more needs assessment. And I think that we know that there are clear opportunities for libraries based on what we've done so far. Oh.
We were struck by Rochester's point about the opportunities open to the library because other units on campus perceived that there were needs that weren't part of their portfolio to meet. We have found the same thing.
Toronto.
I think
okay, so we'll just pause for a Okay, thanks. That was fantastic. We'll just pause for a minute here for any questions or comments. Feel free to use the chat window, and we'll keep moving on in the interest of time for our guest speakers. So next up is Natsuko Nichols, who's going to introduce our guest speakers. Natsuko, the floor is yours.
Okay. We already passed two, so I would just likely to introduce two guest speakers very quickly. Next slide. So we have Tom Lindsay and Alicia Moore from University of Minnesota. The connection between me and them are the presentations at the ISS. We had an annual conference meeting in Toronto at the University of Toronto people, where sort of the host institutions. The ISS stands for International Association for Social Science Information and Technology Services. It's been about 40 years around, and they had a great presentation, and they're spearheading in the data needs assessment, so I decided to invite them to this CLEAR session, not CLEAR, I'm sorry, the research peer network session. So just a very quick introduction. Tom is a research services coordinator for the College of Liberal Arts, CLA, at the University of Minnesota. He works with faculty across the liberal arts and developing and supporting human subject research projects from initial design through data collection and analysis. Over the last year, he has worked with the college to expand the mission of his office to include many new aspects of data management. Tom earned his degrees in history. He's also speaking with Alicia. Alicia is a data management research associate in the College of Liberal Arts, CLA, at the University of Minnesota. She received a PhD in psychology and a master's in statistics from the University of Michigan. In her role as a data management consultant, she's developing data management services in the social sciences and helping researchers across CLA manage and analyze their data. So I would pass on to them.
Okay, thank you, Natsuko. So can everybody hear me? Okay, so I think we're on the right one now. Yeah, we're on the right one. Okay, we're just little technical details. So anyway, we're from the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Minnesota. I think this makes us in a little bit different place than everybody else on this call. We're not in the libraries. The University of Minnesota is a very large campus as well. And so we're positioned in the College of Liberal Arts, which at the University of Minnesota includes the social sciences, the humanities, and the fine arts. It does not include the sciences. So anyway, our office is related both to IT and to the Associate Dean for Research in our college. I report to both of them. And we've been tasked to support CLA researchers with all aspects of the data lifecycle for their research, including experimental project planning, designing and hosting of online surveys and experiments, execution of behavioral studies both in the lab and online, as well as all aspects of data management, analysis, pre-processing, so forth. So we work closely in collaboration with the libraries here on campus, and we certainly make sure to coordinate what we're doing with them, but we're not actually part of the libraries. So this needs assessment process in the College of Liberal Arts actually started quite a long time ago, about a year and a half ago, where we were actually starting to meet with faculty about some other things, and the discussion came up of how we might be able to handle the growing needs in data management. And so the initial phase of this was actually hiring Alicia, and so in that process I have sort of what I'm calling a level 0 here, and I'm calling it a level 0 because it really predated the process of a needs assessment as we know it. But this involved a lot of discussions with faculty, both individually and also in focus groups and in other meetings, especially as it related to a lot of our data collection projects, where we saw a real gap as we were handing things off to people who weren't ready to receive them, essentially. So with that, I'll let Alicia continue with the list.
So I've been in my position for a little bit over a year. The first thing I did in terms of a needs assessment was to meet one-on-one with 27 different researchers, as well as different research service providers throughout the university and the college. And then the main thing we'll be talking about, and the number 2 seem to not have survived the slide transfers, but is the online survey we sent to all CLA faculty. So we sent personalized links to all 525 of our tenure track faculty. We had 161 respondents, about a 30% response rate, but more impressively, I think, is the broadness of our representation. We had 29 out of our 32 departments represented. So we can move to the next slide. And so just talking about some of the decisions we made in our assessment, what we did in our survey. So one of the things that had come up is low response rates among the humanities and sometimes social sciences. Because our college is almost entirely humanities and social sciences, we wanted to take care to make sure we didn't exclude anyone. So we took care with assumptions about data. So not everyone thinks about their scholarly work or creative work as data. So we actually designed our survey as a choose-your-own-adventure, where faculty would indicate how they thought of the materials they work with in the course of their scholarly work, and then they were redirected towards either questions about research materials or questions about data, and that decided the rest of their survey. And so we also want to take care, because not all materials are digital either, especially when you talk about things that aren't considered data. So we only made sure to ask about digital materials. We also framed it from a researcher viewpoint. From my own experience, coming from a non-library research field, most researchers don't know terms like metadata, so we try not to use them in the survey. We also defined questions around research benchmarks, so what you do with your data after publication, active data that you're contributing to or analyzing, etc. We also did just a survey design choice, a combination of design choice questions and open-ended questions. So we weren't overwhelming them with open-ended responses, but we still got the opportunity for them to say anything we didn't particularly ask about. We also included other please specify and comment sections and everything. Again, number 4 seems to have left, but that should be number 4. And we found that people did make use of the comment sections because they almost always had something to say about questions we asked. And we also, number 1, I guess, in probably contributing to our high response rate, is we had the email sent on our behalf from the Associate Dean for Research. As Tom said, we report directly to him as well as to CLA OIT, and so he has really been a great and very important supporter of our work.
Okay, so our project went very well, I think, but we did have a few things that when it was done, we think we might have done differently, some things that we didn't necessarily consider when we first constructed this. One of these is that we actually set this up to use our university's authentication system so that we would know who the researchers were. And we didn't make any claims about it being anonymous so that we could identify and follow up with researchers. However, after we were done and we had some questions that we wanted to follow up with, we went to our Associate Dean to talk about following up on some of these points. And he became really nervous about it because while we hadn't said that it was anonymous, we also had failed to explicitly state that we might be following up with them. And so it's one of those things that we hadn't really considered in advance that this might be a problem. And it certainly is true that there are a lot of opportunities, especially, as Alicia pointed out, with the free responses that we allowed them to provide. A lot of people asked us questions. They gave us information that we would have liked to have followed up on. And we sort of lost an opportunity to do so. So I think that's something that should be done. Also, our IRB maintains the stance that our project is an administrative project only, and as such, we don't need IRB approval. And we did, in fact, proceed accordingly, and they continue to maintain that we don't need IRB approval for this project. But when we've been talking with other faculty, or I'm sorry, with other institutions, we're finding that it might have been easier to have basically overridden our IRB and gotten the approval anyway, just because it makes it that much easier describing this to other universities. It gives us more flexibility with it. And so I think we're actually going to pursue doing that after the fact anyway, despite our IRB's recommendation that we don't need to. And I think that that's something that an exempt approval is very easy to get, and it's something that I would recommend doing just because it makes more options available. Finally, the specificity to our population, I think, is really important. As I pointed out, our college only has the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts. And so the instrument that we wrote is not a generalized university instrument in the specific terminology that we used. We used specific terminology to address the needs of our researchers, to address what we expect their needs are, how they think about their data. And so that does, of course, mean that to run it against a different population does take some tweaks. And it means that every time that a project like this is run, it needs to be context specific. It needs to be sensitive to the way that researchers think about their work. And I actually think that this is something that we did very well. And I think that one of the reasons that it appears here as number one is that in fact, I think that it really helped the quality of the data that we collected.
So just to go through some of our findings pretty quickly, what was echoed a lot in many of the presentations earlier, the researchers aren't aware of the current resources that are out there. So 82% of our faculty were either not familiar or only somewhat familiar with our office, and almost all of them were less than somewhat familiar with the library's data management website, which is a really good source for data management information. And actually, if you Google UMN data management, it's the first hit. So there's definitely some issues there. But one of the things we tried to do to increase this awareness is we made improved web presence. We realized that it was very hard to discern what kind of services we provide and whether we're in the data management field at all. So we've been working on an improved website that not only links to us, but also provides links to the libraries and other relevant service providers. We have created brochures for our office and did targeted mailings to new faculty in CLA. So at the beginning of the semester, we sent individually a brochure and a letter to each new faculty member telling them what we were doing and what we did, and we've had a lot of people come to our office because of that. I also was a guest lecturer in a graduate methods course in psychology, and so I talked a little bit about data management issues, what are the things graduate students should be thinking of, and how it can tie into a general education in methods. And we're working on a way with the libraries and other service providers to present the spectrum of campus services in a unified way, so researchers aren't bombarded with a bunch of different messages coming from different offices. So those are how we're trying to increase awareness.
So another key finding, this probably isn't terribly surprising to anybody who works a lot with researchers in the social sciences, but we actually have quite a bit of sensitive data that our university sort of didn't think that they had. 7% of our CLA faculty report having PHI or HIPAA data. A much larger percentage of them have other sensitive data of very similar types to PHI, that's protected health information. And I think one of the notes about this, it depends a bit on your campus environment. At our campus, the Academic Health Center is a group on campus that it's basically the consortium of the medical-related schools on our campus. And the College of Liberal Arts is not part of that. And the university has made an assumption that all PHI resides inside of the Academic Health Center. And so that raises a problem where there isn't actually a good service to provide for that need. And so we've been working to educate our faculty about what sort of data security needs they have and what the state of their various tools on campus is as it relates to the sensitivity of their data. And we're also advocating for better access to secure storage for our legally protected data. Part of this, it relates to the specific tools that are available and the tools that will be made available in the near future, and also the way that faculty interact with it. So we're trying to improve all of those things to deal with this problem.
Another finding that was, well, not really surprising, but something we have to take action on is we asked faculty how they share their data with collaborators. So this is active data as they're collecting or analyzing it, sharing with people on their team. And as you can see from the bars, the most common way was to share via email and then via Dropbox. Neither of which are secure methods for sharing data, and we also have specific tools through the University of Minnesota that are secure ways to share data with collaborators. For example, UMN Net Files is something that's approved for legally protected data, but as you can see, very few faculty members are actually using it. And so again, reiterating Tom's previous point, we're going to increase education, so make it very clear and easy to find what are the security constraints of each tool. I think the University of Michigan has a really good website about this. Their IT has done a really good job making that clear and easy to find. But another thing we have to do is advocate for better tools and more awareness about the tools, because faculty aren't using the secure tools we have. There must be a reason. NetFiles itself is pretty clunky and difficult to use, but also the aspect that makes it more Dropbox-like, having a desktop Dropbox, if you will, is very difficult to figure out how to download or even know that you can. So we need to do some improving there.
So long-term data storage is definitely the #1 unmet need. From our respondents, it was very clear that this was a large gap. Only 4% of our respondents self-identify as archiving data from past projects. And I think one of the challenges here is just what's available and awareness of what's available. Similarly, most of our faculty are willing to share their data, but they don't. And they've identified a lot of different reasons for that behavior, including privacy concerns, lack of time, lack of standards, some concern about who it's being shared with and when and why. And so our university is currently establishing a university repository that will be available this summer. And it will offer the possibility of offering multiple levels of openness to the data. So if a faculty member only wants to share it with people of her choosing, then she can do so. She can identify on a request basis whether somebody gets access to the data, or providing a lot of integrated levels of ways to provide access, so that it isn't just simply all or nothing, which is a state that our faculty are not. They're not interested. When they get a choice of all or nothing, they choose nothing. We also are looking to provide archive-only solutions for non-shareable data. This is not something that the University of Minnesota currently provides, and so that is something that is in the pipeline. We're working on developing that.
So the final main finding we wanted to talk about is that many of our faculty, both people who responded to data and research methods, work with qualitative data. So even out of those data respondents, almost half reported that they worked with qualitative data in some capacity, usually in conjunction with quantitative data. And on top of that, a third of our respondents have audio or video data, which are even more complex in terms of the size constraints. They can't be shared via normal sharing tools, and they're also more difficult to de-identify and preserve confidentiality. So some of the things we are planning to do is create informational resources and make those widely available online on de-identifying qualitative data, also linking out to a lot of great resources that already exist online. And then also we are hiring a position in our office within CLA that has expertise in qualitative data analysis and management. A lot of our faculty really want to work with qualitative data analysis tools like Atlas TI, NVivo, or Deduce. And we don't really have the content knowledge right now to help people work with those tools in a way that provides best practices in data management, and so we're hoping to hire someone to fill in those gaps in our office.
So meeting these needs, of course, requires actions beyond our office. We're one office within the College of Liberal Arts. We have a staff of 4, soon to be 5 full-time employees. And there's an awful lot of services available throughout the university. And so one of the big pushes that we've made in this progress and something in this project, and something we're continuing to make progress on, is reaching out to stakeholders and service providers across the university. There are people providing services in the space across the university, and often researchers aren't aware of what's provided where. And so this village is across institutional boundaries, and it exists across the life cycle of data management. So
just talking about the people we've contacted before are members of our village, if you will. So we have them listed in order from more central locations, so ones you'd find at a university level, to ones that are closer to the researcher, whether at a college level or a department level. And our office is in red. We are at the college level. We do serve the College of Management in some capacity as well. And of course, where these people are in your institutions are going to vary, but just looking across levels as well as parts of the research life cycle or what kind of services they provide. So just to wrap up, just say thank you. I know many of you have done surveys, but if anyone's interested in using our questions or tweaking it, we would love to collaborate. We mentioned that we were interested in using our data as one point for the College of Liberal Arts. We've also run this in the medical school at the University of Minnesota. So Tom's point about really matching your population, we found that's very true with the tweaks we have. But we'd love to have people from other institutions run this survey, collect data. The ultimate goal is to figure out what works across contexts. So for example, if your institution, if at your institution people aren't sharing via email and Dropbox, we'd love to know why. Tell us your secrets, because that would be great. But just ultimately to have solutions that work in a variety of contexts. So any questions?
Tom and Alicia, thank you so much. If you have questions for our guest speakers, go ahead and put those in the chat box, and we will monitor that. And we've got just a few minutes left just to do a few housekeeping items, so we'll pause here for some Q&A.
You can also email us too if a question percolates later.
While we're waiting for any questions or comments to come through, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Vesela, who's going to talk to our group members about our one-on-one consultations. Vesela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rita. Hi, everyone. So if you remember when you signed up for the network, one of the things in our offer was a consultation with your institution. And so these consultations are individualized or one-on-one in the sense that it is just going to be your team and one or maybe a couple of our postdocs and faculty, and we'll have either 90 minutes or 2 sessions of 45 minutes depending on your choice and the kinds of questions you have. And so we're going to be able to get together possibly via Skype or Google Hangouts so that we can actually directly talk to each other. It's going to be fewer people, so the communication is going to be is going to roll on much faster. And you get to choose the topics or the questions that you have. And if you have a certain postdoc or faculty member that you want to be present at those consultations, you can request that person. Or if you choose not, if you just want to send us your questions, we can figure out between ourselves who is the best, the person with the best fitting skill set to handle those questions. So in order to pursue this consultation, we need to know what you're interested in talking about, and we would like you to email your questions and topics to Rita. Her email is on the slide. And please do that by July 31st because we need to do our part of preparing for this consultation. And do you have any questions? I will post a reminder in the Clear Connect community about the consultations and about the questions that you all need to submit. Okay, just a few housekeeping items to go over very quickly. As Vesela just mentioned, the consultation questions, we'd like to have your questions in by the end of July. Our next webinar is Wednesday, August 13th at 1 o'clock, and that will be on library instruction and faculty and student engagement. A reminder to all of you to stay active and keep the conversation going in our Clear Connect community, as well as on Twitter. There is the hashtag there, eResearchNetwork. There's also a new LinkedIn community for our group, and I did send each of you an invitation to join that. You're not required to do that by any means, but if you'd like to use the LinkedIn community for professional networking and other types of discussion, by all means, feel free to join. Another reminder of our idea scale community. This is where we collect ideas for webinar topics or for topics for informal discussion in the idea scale community. You can submit your suggestions and vote on the ideas of others. And just lastly, a reminder that the recording from today's webinar will be made available in Clear Connect. And Alicia and Tom, I will send you the URL to that recording as well if you like. So, on behalf of Clear and DLF, a very large thank you to everyone for today's overview of data management needs. A very special thank you to our guest speakers, Tom and Alicia. And to all of our group members, our faculty, and postdoctoral fellows, thank you for your participation in the group activity, and for joining us today for the webinar. This concludes today's session, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. I will be leaving the chat window open for a few minutes if you want to just hang out and have some discussion there. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon.